this up. I hereby call to order the March 20th City of New Bern Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Everyone that can and is able, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Kendrick, can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We're going to start with Board Member Kyle Deering.
Here.
Board Member Danielle Peoples. Just let the record show she is absent. Board Member Kip Paraguay. Let the record show he is absent. Chairman Brad Jefferson.
Here.
Board Member Rusty Ingram.
Here.
Board Member Kelly Kaiser.
Here.
Board Member Thomas Brownell.
Here.
And Board Member Marshall Ballard.
Yeah, here.
And Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Kendrick. What is the board's purview on the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as written.
Second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any other conversation? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Chairman's remarks tonight, I don't have any, so we're going to move into action items. I do want to read this little blurb before we jump into action item A. Just some background and context on the role of the Planning and Zoning Board. The responsibilities of this Planning and Zoning Board this evening include approval of general and subdivision plots, a rezoning, and some text amendments. 7 members of this board are appointed by the Board of Aldermen and must reside within the City of New Bern. 1 member is appointed by the Craven County Board of Commissioners and resides within the city's extraterritorial planning area, the ETJ. This board is an advisory authority to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen acts in its legislative capacity and follows voting procedures as part of their official meetings. The Board of Aldermen is not bound by the recommendations of this Planning and Zoning Board. With our 5 action items this evening, we'll have the staff report. We will then take public comment, limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and then we'll have applicant remarks. This order and public hearing protocol reflects the board's recently adopted rules and procedures. So with that, Kendrick, you give us a staff report on item number A, or item A.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to the board as well. I'm going to start with this first item here for Hutton Pointe, Phase 2 at Bluewater Rise. This is a final plat, PUD, for major subdivision 003-019-2025. And the request summary here, the applicant is John G. Thomas, PE, owner, principal engineer, Thomas Engineering, PA. And the owner here is Sydes Construction, Inc. The location is Bluewater Rise. Again, it's a planned unit development, and it's off of County Line Road. The existing zoning currently is residential 8, and that's R8 for its abbreviation. And the size here is 76.77 approximate total acres. The overview is the proposed planned unit development is to establish 94 lots for single-family detached dwellings. The subject property, again, is zoned as R-8, residential 8. This is established as a residential district just in accordance with the land use ordinance. And the purpose of a residential district is essentially to provide comfortability, health, safety, and a pleasant environment in which to live. For the first map here, we've got the vicinity map, and I worked with our GIS personnel to try to help better kind of single out where that is and where that actual piece is. So the outline that you see there, like the greenish, tealish color, that essentially is the location. And here is the buffer map, and just showing and showcasing our 100-foot buffer that we take from the property lines there. And any individuals that are within this buffer should receive notification just in accordance with our notification requirements. And that's followed by an aerial map here, just to show you and give you an understanding as to what's on the ground. And then this also, lastly here, is or at least for the zoning map, shows that distinguished district as far as the R-8 in that color. I know it might be slightly hard to see with the overlay or the hatching. And moving on, just showing the plat. It's essentially the first page. And that's followed by the second page there. And for staff's evaluation, the proposed subdivision does meet all requirements set forth in the City of New Bern's land use ordinance. And lastly, does the board have any questions on those at this time?
Board have any questions for Kendra? No. Thank you, Kendra. So we're going to open this up to public comment period, but before that, I want to just read a little thing on public comment. It should be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Comments should be directed to the board and city staff and be relevant to the action item being discussed. Groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or other similar associations may appoint one spokesperson to present their points of view to the board. Please note this is a comment period, so the board is not taking or responding to questions during this step. Does anyone have any public comment on action item A? And those comments will be for any other action item as well. All right, hearing none. So we'll move to applicant's remarks. Does the applicant have any remarks on this item?
Yes, John Thomas with Thomas Engineering here in New Bern. I don't really have any additional comments to make. It's paved. It's ready to start building houses out there. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Any questions for Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Chair, it may be important to note, Mr. Thomas, it's my understanding that your firm submitted a letter of credit for this property. Is that correct? Letter of credit for this property, for the bond?
The letter of credit.
Yes. Yeah, there's basically all that work's basically been done, but at the time that we thought we were going to be in here, we went ahead and released the letter of credit. And that was delivered to
Yes, sir.
Kendra's office.
And accepted by Public Works? Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jane. Okay, so having said that, got another little spiel I want to read. The board has the decision to approve the action reflecting the plan satisfies the technical requirements of the board's city land use ordinance, or deny this action indicating the plan fails to satisfy the technical requirements of the city's land use ordinance. If the board finds the plat or proposed subdivision fails to comply with one or more requirements of the city's land use ordinance, the motion must state the deficiency and the bias on the basis of which the proposed subdivision could be approved. And with that, I'll open it up to the board for discussion. Hearing none, and I'll entertain a motion on this item.
I move we approve the application for the final plat as submitted.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. On to item B.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Noah Mills is going to be presenting that item. He's our planner one.
Okay. All right. Come on up, Mr. Mills.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'll be discussing item B tonight, which is REZ 0030202025, and that's the 3530 Neuse Boulevard rezoning. Moving on to the request summary, the applicant/owner is David Bailey. The location is 3530 Neuse Boulevard. The current zoning is commercial 4 or C4, and the requested change of zoning is to commercial 3 or C3. The parcel identification number is going to be 8-243-106, and the approximate size is 13.54 acres. Moving on to the commercial 4 or C4 zoning district analysis. The C4 neighborhood business district is established as a district in which the principal land use is to provide retailing of goods and services to the nearby residential neighborhoods. The regulations of this district are designed to limit the businesses which may be established in order to protect the abutting residential areas. Moving on to the commercial 3 or C3 zoning district analysis. The C3 commercial district is established as a district for offices, personal services, and the retailing of durable and convenience goods. This district is a high volume traffic area and will be subject to the view of not only local residents but tourists and other non-local motorists. Ample off-street parking, controlled traffic movement, and an appropriate appearance, including suitable planning, shall be provided. This is a little bit about the uses comparison between commercial 4 or C4 and commercial 3 or C3. As you can see, if it's labeled S, it will be permitted by special use. Z is permitted by right. If it's left blank, then it's not permitted in this area. I'll give the board a few moments to look at that. This is the vicinity map for the property. As you can see, it's highlighted in red. This is the buffer map for the property. So all residents within 100 feet of this buffer were notified of this rezoning request. This is the aerial for the property. As you can see, it's highlighted in red. And this is the zoning map for the property. I know it's a little bit hard to see with the red overlay, but the pink is going to be the current C4 zoning district. As you can see, there's adjacent C3 use, and that's highlighted in red. And there's also a bit at the top left corner. So the action needed for this request will be adoption of a consistency statement and a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. And if the board has any questions, I can take them at this time.
Board have questions? No, here, no. Thank you, Noah. Good job. With that, I'll open up for a public comment on item B. Seeing none, would the applicant like to make any comments on this item? It's not required, but if you do.
Say good evening, and I'm available to answer any questions that the board has.
Board have questions?
Do you have specific plans for this property at this point?
That is something I have contemplated over the past few years, but I have decided to, at this time, list the property for sale.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right.
I would say it would be a great property for the New Bern Parks Intervention Department. It's
Fair enough.
and then the city of New Bern is working on that project back there. I think it's wonderful, and it's a beautiful piece of land. Anyways, personally, I think it'd be a good place for a public park. But.
Appreciate the plug. Like it. All right, so before we move on to the board, I got this spiel here on rezoning. The board has a decision to recommend approval to finding a consistency and reasonableness, signifying the proposed amendment is consistent with any comprehensive or applicable land use plans or determined to be reasonable in the public interest. Recommended denial and finding of inconsistency or unreasonableness, which is a recommendation that the Board of Aldermen deny the proposed amendment based on findings that is inconsistent with any comprehensive or application land use plans and determined to be unreasonable and not in public interest. The existing zoning ordinance was adopted on March 5th, 1968, effective March 15th, 1968. I like adding that little detail. Was the board, or I'll open up the discussion to the board.
Well, I would say my feeling is that it's in a large grouping of C4 properties. Typically, what I recall is when we consider these types of things, it's when someone has a particular use ready for the project and they need to change the zoning to incorporate a particular use. In this particular case, I think the applicant is opening up to more uses to make the property more desirable for folks. And at least for me personally, I don't feel that that's a reason to allow or enable or recommend to the Board of Aldermen a rezoning of this property.
Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion on this item.
And just to be clear, Mr. Chair, if you're going to make a motion, you're going to want to cite whether the rezoning request is consistent or inconsistent with the land use plans and adjacent uses. And also you're going to want to address whether it's reasonable or unreasonable given the information that's before you.
So I make a motion that we deny the request for the rezoning, basically for the reason of it is close to a public park, and we're opening up this piece of property to many more commercial type uses in an area where there's a lot less. Yes, there is C3 across the street, but it's basically an old gas station. And I feel it's not appropriate, especially with the proximity to the park in the back. So I move that we recommend to the Board of Aldermen that they deny the rezoning request.
Are you saying it's inconsistent?
I'm saying it's inconsistent.
So your motion is that the item is inconsistent.
My motion is that the item is inconsistent.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on that item? I'm going to call for a roll call on this one.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start with Board Member Kyle Deering.
I'm going to agree with Rusty's statement there that it's inconsistent.
And then Board Member Kelly Kaiser.
Yes.
Okay. Chairman Brad Jefferson.
No.
And Board Member Rusty Ingram.
Yes.
Correct. And then Board Member Thomas Brownell.
Yes.
And Board Member Marshall Ballard.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman, that vote was 5-1.
Okay, roger that. Motion carries. We have to do one on recommendation as well, right, since it is inconsistent. Are we still doing a recommendation to the board?
That was your recommendation.
That was the recommendation.
You recommended
Okay, all right, roger that. Okay, so we're done with item B. Okay, moving on to item C.
The next item here for the board to review is another rezoning. This is REZ 003-028-2025. This is a bit of there's a lot of moving parts, but it's part of Tracts A and B for Derby Park and part of Common Area B, Athens Acres for Phase 1. That is the rezoning. And the request summary here, the applicant is Eric Remington. The owners are Paul Creighton Jr., Eastern Land Holdings LLC, and Phoenix Derby Park LLC. And the location is just Derby Park. The current zoning, the current zoning districts is Industrial 1 or I1, Residential 6 or R-6, Residential 10A or R-10A, and Agriculture 5F or A-5F. The requested change for the zoning is to Residential 6 or R-6, and Residential 10A or R-10A. Parcel identification numbers, I apologize that I do not have the actual numbers listed. That is a mistake. I can get the numbers for the record. Disregard that parcel identification number. The sizing and the totality is 49.61 as a total. So moving on to the Industrial 1, the I-1 zoning district analysis. In the short gist, the analysis provides that the industrial district is established as a district in which the principal use of land is for industries which can be operated in a relatively clean and quiet manner, and essentially as to which to work with the general public, and for certain outdoor amusement facilities which generate large volumes of automobile traffic. And another key point, residential uses in this district are permitted only upon the issuance of a special use permit. So residential 6, that zoning district analysis, simply put, the R-6 residential district is designed to accommodate for single, 2, and multifamily dwellings with 6,000 square feet minimum lots for one dwelling unit and 2,000 square feet required for each additional unit. This is also to encourage continued use of land for residential purposes and certain compatible non-residential uses. It prohibits commercial and industrial use of land, or uses of land, to prohibit any other use which would also substantially interfere with the development or continuation of residential structures. It also is to encourage the discontinuance of existing uses that would not be permitted as new uses. And the residential 10A or R-10A zoning district analysis, essentially it follows suit with R-10. That's what's referenced here, basically in the land use ordinance. Is to promote the general purposes of this ordinance. The general intent of this district is the same as, again, the R-10 district. So I have that supported right behind with the residential 10 or R-10 zoning district analysis here. This is particularly designed to accommodate for single and 2 family homes with 10,000 square feet lots required for 1 family dwellings and an additional 5,000 square feet required for each additional unit for the R-10 residential district and promoting the general purposes of this ordinance. So this is to encourage the continued use of the land for residential purposes, to prohibit commercial and industrial uses, to encourage the discontinuance of existing uses that would not be permitted as new uses, and essentially to discourage any use which would generate traffic on minor streets other than normal traffic to serve residences. The agriculture 5F or A-5F zoning district analysis, this is more geared towards your agriculture and forestry district, is designed to also promote forestry operations, low density residential uses, recreational uses, and certain agricultural uses. It encourages the conservation of the area's existing agricultural and forestry resources, or the agricultural and forestry resource, and promotes low-density development. It is to prohibit non-agricultural and non-forestry related commercial and industrial uses of the land, and prohibit any other influx of uses such thereas. And here you have a uses comparison chart. You're going to have 2 here. This is the first one for agricultural 5F, and that's A-5F for the abbreviation, versus industrial 1 or I-1. And essentially, just as my colleague had referenced, the S is standing for a special use permit requirement, the Z is for permitted by rights, and if it is blank, you are not allowed to do it in that district. So I'll give you a moment to just view those comparisons. And that is followed by another comparison chart because we have multiple districts here that we're dealing with. So the residential 6 or R-6 zoning district is also in comparison to residential 10A and R-10A. So once again, I'm just going to give you a moment to briefly view those. And moving forward, we're going to give you the vicinity map. And once again, there are the properties highlighted in red. And this showcases all 3 properties. That's followed by the buffer map, which was taken for the 100-foot radius for the written notice requirements that we provided. Anyone within that buffer should have received a notice. And following the buffer map there is the aerial map, which just kind of gives you the idea again as to what's on the ground. And then you have the zoning map here. And this is essentially what the current zoning looks like, just to kind of help the board get a picture, because I know there's a lot of moving parts for this particular situation. So we've done what looks to be the current zoning, and then after that, immediately, this would be the result if approved. That's to reflect it as the new, how it would look, at least. And then the action needed for the board would be the adoption of the consistency statement and the recommendation for the Board of Aldermen. But if the board has any additional questions, I'll accept those at this time.
Kendrick, can you go back 2 slides, please?
Yes.
So up in the top, before you get to the railroad, is that I-1? Is that the grade district up at the top?
Yes. I believe it is, yes, sir.
Okay, so it's basically R6 at the bottom left, or R8 at the bottom left. R6?
Yes.
R6, okay. And then R10A in the triangle in the middle, and then I-1 at the top.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, it's a bit.
No, it's okay. With
Hatching.
the red hatching, it makes it
It's
tough to read.
blurring, I apologize.
It's okay.
Board have any other questions? All right. Thank you, Kendra. I'll open up to any public comment on this item. All right, seeing none, I'll open it up if the applicant would like to make any comments on this item.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Eric Remington. I'm with the law firm of Ward and Smith. I'm representing the applicant on this matter, actually all 3 of them. As you can see, this is a, can you go back to the, as you can see, the slide there shows the property, and it shows that the industrial 1 area is up near the railroad, and then it's got the triangular shaped area that's red checked, which is the R10 area, I believe, and then the bottom area is the agricultural area, which is green. That actually overextends into the parcel that is owned by the HOA, and so part of this is to really sort of clean this area up and make it consistent with what's out there. So what we're asking to do is, like the map showed, we're asking that it basically be all R6 for the one bigger tract and the little small tract that's at the end of Elizabeth Avenue, and then the other one be the HOA tract be all R10A, so that it eliminates that little triangular piece there. We believe that it's consistent with the land use plan, and we provided a significant amount of information on that in our application to try to give you all some information to base your decision on. And again, think that this is, consistent with the areas around it in the land use plan. So we'd ask you to approve it or recommend approval of it to the Board of Aldermen and pass it. And I'm happy to answer any kind of questions that you all have.
Board have questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I have another question for Kendrick. Kendrick,
Yes, sir.
these yellow areas seem to have the green dots in them, which I think on your legend was R8. Is it R6 or R8?
I'm trying to clarify that here.
These are tough to read when we get them.
It's a bit clearer when I'm looking at it as I'm making it, but unfortunately, it's harder to read on this side. R-6 is, which area were you commenting on, Mr. Rusty? I apologize.
No, you're fine. Any of the yellow areas, like up at the top left,
So the top left
that
is
has the little green dots in it.
Yes, sir.
So is that R8?
It should be R-8, if I'm not mistaken. It's either R-8 or R-6. It appears that it's R-8.
And then at the bottom,
Right. I believe that is the R-6.
that's R-6 at the
Yes,
bottom.
sir.
And then over to the right-hand side where the yellow is?
R-6.
So it's all R-6 up to the parcel that we're talking, or
Yes, sir.
parcels that we're talking about.
Yes, sir, because the R-8 is actually not included as a zoning district as a part of this application, so
Okay.
that is R-6, that's correct.
Yeah, that's in the packet, I think, Mr. Remington. Yeah, I think it's in the packet. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion on this item? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion that Tract B and part of Tract A, Derby Park, portion of Common Area B, Athens Acres Phase 1 rezoning, that it is consistent with the land use plan and that we recommend approval.
All right. I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item number D. Kendrick, you have a staff report for us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the next item here is text amendment. It's TXTA 003-029-2025 land use text amendment. And the sections to be amended here are 15-78, minor subdivision approval, and section 15-15, basic definitions and interpretations. And underneath that, essentially, is the definition pertaining to the subdivision minor, which is specified as 129 in the definition section. The proposed amendment I have shown here, just to make it as easily readable as possible. I'm going to just really allow the board to view that at their own leisure for a moment. I have essentially just pasted what the applicant has submitted, and the applicant can elaborate further for any questions that you may want to entertain.
Kendrick, do you want to address the change in applicant?
Yes, I apologize. In regards to the application, it is going to change hands and be performed and submitted through development services. So just for the
I'm sorry, I
record.
don't understand what that means.
So this is being submitted from development services.
Not from the New Bern Preservation Foundation.
Correct. I apologize. I did not actually bring that up.
And
I do have the
why is
application here. What's that?
Why is that?
The New
So
Bern-
I'm sorry.
The New Bern Preservation Foundation, I think, brought this request to planning staff, and planning staff has reviewed the concerns or the proposed changes from the Preservation Foundation, and our ordinance allows for certain entities in order to be able to initiate a zoning text amendment. One of those entities is a city department, and based on the collaboration between staff and the citizen group, staff is proposing the application.
And I'll move on to the next slide, at least so you can
Fair
do
enough.
that as well. And the proposed amendment continued, once again, it's just a snippet from what was previously submitted. And staff's evaluation, staff does not have any concerns and can support the proposed changes. So if there's any questions from the board, I'd be happy to take those.
Board have a question?
Yes. So my understanding is that this was proposed by the New Bern Preservation Foundation for a particular purpose, for a particular lot. And what they want to do is not allowed by the current ordinances, which I totally understand. And I guess my first question is there any other way to allow the New Bern Preservation Foundation to do what they want, which basically in the report is they bought a lot with 6 houses that are historically relevant, and they want to break it up into 6 individual lots with those houses so that they can sell them and individuals can actually own them, which I think is a great thing. That's my personal opinion. But I understand the minor subdivision rule says they can only do 4.
Correct.
Is there any variance, any other thing we can do? Is there a vote we can take? Is there, because my personal preference is not to change the ordinance, just to, because then you're basically allowing it forever.
I understand what you're saying, sir. So staff has evaluated and worked as much as what we could to see if there was any other alternatives. We did not find any.
Okay.
So this was the next measure to take, essentially. So you have to afford the person, essentially, or anyone for that matter, to have the ability to submit a text amendment in that reference. But as far as for what we have currently, that this is where we are. We do not have any other alternative to change or help.
So there's no waiver or variance. There's if the ordinance says this, that means no one can do it, period.
General statute, chapter 160D, section 8, or article 8,
strictly regulates how municipalities and counties can regulate subdivisions and perform those subdivisions. One of the options is exempt subdivisions, and this particular plan does not meet any form of exemption that they could qualify for. It also strictly regulates what is and what isn't a major subdivision. So in lieu of any sort of exemption, which is not applicable, this is the option that was presented.
So basically, it doesn't qualify as a minor subdivision, but it also doesn't qualify as a major subdivision.
And additionally, you can't vary a use. So if we did vary the subdivision, you're essentially varying those uses to allow it as it is.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what that means. Maybe I just didn't follow you.
You aren't allowed by general statute to vary a use, and if you're performing this variance to subdivide it to allow those uses, you're essentially varying that use.
A follow-up question is, I understand the whole idea of striking 4 and making it 6. What I didn't understand was, why are you striking the 5 acres or less part of the regulation, the ordinance? Because this lot that the New Bern Preservation Foundation owns is 5/8 of an acre, and the acreage has no bearing on this. So I don't understand why we would change that.
There are several situations that were presented to staff where there was no relief for an applicant. The New Bern Preservation Society was just the first one to bring up the idea of doing a text amendment, and what was presented to us is something staff could support.
Yeah, but
this is a pretty common practice in many municipalities. If you look at the ordinances of other jurisdictions, like other cities and counties, they go all the way up to 10 lots with no restrictions on lot size. This is pretty minor as far as what's allowed as a minor subdivision.
So then why 6? If other counties do 10, why did we pick 6?
That is just what the Preservation Society had recommended, and that is something that staff could support. So this is how it was drafted up.
Okay.
And so basically now, if we adopted this text amendment, we're going to enable, you're going to enable any lot of any size to become a minor subdivision if it has less than 6 houses or 6 lots on it, is basically what you're saying. Any size, doesn't matter.
No, you still would not be allowed to develop multiple residences on a single residentially zoned parcel. You would have to subdivide it before you could put multiple houses, one on each lot. Right now, this is considered a non-conforming situation. This text amendment makes it a conforming situation.
No, I understand. I understand what the New Bern Preservation Foundation wants to do, and I fully support what they want to do. What I don't support is changing the ordinance forever and including eliminating the restriction of a lot size of 5 acres or less. 4, 6, 8, good with that. I don't agree with removing the limitation of lot size. And if that ever came up, you'd bring it back to us as a text amendment and we consider it then. I just don't see the reason to do it now because it's not necessary for this particular situation. What I'm trying to do is help the New Bern Preservation Foundation get done what they need to get done. Great. I don't agree with removing that part of the ordinance. But I can't make that. You guys presented it to us, and we get to vote on what you presented to us.
Yes, sir.
Kendra, can you back up a couple of slides? I just want to reread through that one more time just to make sure I get it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Christie here on the acreage, but
Well, Mr. Chair, members of the board, perhaps this is something for you to ponder. If the text as it's being presented to you tonight gives you pause and you would like to see some revisions to the text based on the comments that you've expressed, you can move to table this item to your next meeting, which will give staff an opportunity to go back, reflect upon your comments, and bring some additional language to you for you all to consider at your next meeting.
Okay. Can we ask the applicant
That would be the city.
That's-
This has also been covered in our land use ordinance update for the past several months, as well as the next text amendment. It was brought before the steering committee, as well as members of all the boards, and it was supported then.
Well, okay, great. I don't agree. So I can't ask the question of the New Bern Preservation Foundation because the applicant is the city. Is that what you're saying?
You can certainly ask the New Bern Preservation Society and their representative, but they are not the applicant.
Okay.
Is there a representative here?
Yes, there is. Mr. Parsons.
Would that representative like to speak on this item?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Eric Remington, again with Ward and Smith. I'm representing New Bern Preservation Foundation. Be happy to answer any kind of questions that you have. Just to address, board member Ingram's questions.
Okay, just real quick, just for
Yes.
point of clarity here. So according to the rules, he's not the applicant. Can we just ask anybody to come up and make comments and ask them questions? Is that
If a
allowed?
majority of you would like to hear from a speaker, you absolutely can.
Okay, so I need a motion for that since he's not the applicant, or is that just,
We could
is everybody okay with talking to him?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
fine, fair enough. Just, I'll just make sure I'm following the rules.
No worries, Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Appreciate the, you considering the rules and trying to follow that. Again, we were working in collaboration with the staff on this, and as you've seen from our application, there's a very specific purpose to this. I would just note for the planning board that this section of the ordinance, has been in the city's ordinances for a long time and was designed specifically for a purpose like this. It's just that I don't think anybody thought about the number of lots that would, could be carved out of it, considering that the Six Sisters has been there since this came about. So, we just thought that if we could do this by text amendment and get it to allow this division of this property into 6 lots, then that would help, the New Bern Preservation Society sell these and basically have, them be in single-family ownership.
Sure.
To answer your question about whether there were other avenues to proceed with, we did look at that also, and trying to get a variance was not going to work. And also, there was no way to do it as a PUD application or anything like that.
Sure.
So we did look at other avenues to try to do it, and text amendment was the only way.
Appreciate that.
If you all have pause about the 5 acres, we'd be happy for you all to table it so that it could be, talked about. And
My question was going to be, do you guys have a time constraint for this?
we do not.
Understood, Richard.
And I'm sorry, this is, Richard Parson is the president of the foundation, and he's with me tonight.
Thanks for being here.
If y'all have any other questions, just let me know.
Board have any questions for applicant? Board have any other questions for staff? I will entertain a motion on this item.
I would move that we table this item to the next meeting and ask staff to revisit the language, at least for myself personally. You want to increase it to 6. I'm okay with that. I think, to accommodate this particular, he's not the applicant, this particular situation, fine. But I think removal of the restriction of 5 acres or less is not one that I would support. So I'd ask staff to look at that again and bring it back to us at the next meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I would add that we are an advisory board to the Board of Aldermen, that this would still has to go to the Board of Aldermen to get approval for. So just add that motion. All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's move on to item E. I thought that was the other thing.
Evening, Board. The next item on the agenda is the text amendment 3030-2025. It's the land use text amendment as well. So the sections to be amended are listed here. There are several different sections that vary from regulation of subdivisions, major subdivision approval process, the endorsements that are required on the major subdivision plats, performance guarantees, amendments to previously approved subdivision plans, public notification requirements for subdivision plans, and under the authority of Section 160D-801, this is what gives the authority to approve or deny subdivisions, and it also explicitly states that it's made on the basis of standards set forth in the subdivision or unified development ordinances, such as our land use ordinance. Oops. There we go. This is the section of Chapter 160D that concerns the review process, filing, and recordation of subdivision plats. Highlighted in Section C, subsection 3, the final decision of a subdivision plat is administrative. The decision may be assigned to staff persons or committee comprised entirely of staff persons, and notice of the decision shall be provided as according to another section of Chapter 160D that covers that. There are several slides that show the red line version. So anything that is shown in red is what is being proposed. Anything that is stricken through is being removed. And I will actually pause on this particular section of it. Feedback received from other city staff and elected officials are how this was initially proposed back in June of 2024. That was earlierly recommended by this board for approval to the Board of Aldermen, that it changed from staff as the zoning administrator having the approval authority to the Director of Development Services or their designee. So that is the only change from when it was brought to this board back in 2024. In the staff evaluation of the text amendment, we don't have any concerns about the language that is being proposed. To give a brief summary of what is being proposed, initially the text does say that the approving authority is the planning board in our ordinance as allowed by general statute. The change that is happening is the approval authority is given to the Director of Development Services or their designee, and part of that would be changing all of the things related to the noticing requirements for the public meeting that we do take for subdivisions. So if there's any questions from the board, I'd be happy to answer them.
Board have questions?
We'll start at the noticing.
Sure.
Let's just kind of start with that, and let's talk about those changes. And
Yeah, so the changes for noticing, currently we notice the public meeting, and that involves any property owner that is within 100 feet. The noticing requirements in general statute that are required under what we're proposing is, Jamie, I believe it's actual notice, or is it posted notice?
Of the decision?
Oh, it's actually constructive notice of the decision, yes. So the applicant would be required to post a sign, much like we post a sign noticing this meeting, that a decision is made for that particular subdivision. The appeal process, anybody who is aggrieved by this that has standing can file an appeal, and they have 30 days within that decision to file that appeal, in which case it would come back for review for the Board of Adjustment.
I think it's Board of Adjustment, yes.
And they would hear whether or not that has merits based off of the procedures that were followed.
okay.
And Ms. Kaiser, it was important from our office's perspective and the staff perspective to include that, because now, under the current ordinance, people have an opportunity to come to the meeting and express themselves under the rules of procedure that you all have adopted. And I think from the development community standpoint, they want to know when their appeal period begins to run. And when that period concludes. So the language that has been proposed tonight, I think is going to benefit the citizenry at large, so that people know what's going on, and benefit our development community so that people are in the know about what's happening. Sure.
Thank you.
Correct, and that also raises another point. In addition to other city staff, as well as elected officials and administration staff, Members of the development community were also consulted as to what they thought about the changes that were being proposed. And actually, I believe a few of the folks who typically operate in the development community or represent the development community are present, if you wanted to ask their perspectives on this as well.
Were any members of the citizenry proposed or asked about the change, other than just the developers?
Anytime we had a public engagement opportunity for the land use ordinance, this was one of the changes that were proposed or informed to the public. Generally speaking, the public had no concerns over it, and several of y'all, I believe, have also heard that presentation.
Okay. Just curious.
I have an issue with this because I think now you're saying, okay, we've already made a decision. We're taking it out of the planning and zoning board's hands. The administrative staff makes the decision, and we're just going to let everybody know that a decision has been made. I don't think that benefits the citizenry. I really don't. And I don't think it gives the citizenry an opportunity to stand up in front of a board like us who considers these types of requests and gives them a chance to express themselves, as Jamie said, and talk about things. So, and I also feel that, yes, you have to comply with all of the guidelines, but to have a single person within the administration make a decision like this when it has already been put forward as something for the planning and zoning board to have input on and discuss, I don't think that benefits the citizenry. And I'm more concerned with the citizenry. I understand it. The development folks would love this because you guys just get to make decisions and then they get to move on. But that doesn't, to me, benefit the citizenry. It actually takes away some of their abilities. In fact,
it should be noted that the citizenry can only speak on this subject as to whether or not it meets the conditions or standards within the ordinance. And this board was presented this amendment it was actually 9 months ago, and it was recommended approval unanimously.
Right.
The only change from that is that
I've
it
changed my
changes from the
opinion.
zoning administrator to the
I've changed my
director.
opinion. I've changed my opinion, and I have the ability to talk about why I've changed my opinion, whether or not this was we agreed to this 9 months ago or not. I have that ability.
Sure.
Okay? So it actually says in the general statute as well as the city ordinance that the whole idea of a planning board is to, or not the whole idea, one of the tenets of a planning board is to facilitate and coordinate citizen engagement and participation in the planning process. Well, you're basically taking that away from the citizenry through this major plat process or major subdivision process. It doesn't give the people an ability to comment or feel like they have a place that they can go and have a discussion. Whether it's going to apply to the project being approved or not, they have the ability to come and talk about it. And in addition, another one of the duties that's given to us by the city ordinance, as well as the general statute, is to advise the governing board concerning the implementation of plans, including, but not limited to, review and comment on all zoning, text, and map amendments as required by the general statute. So this is implementation of plans. So by putting this planning board in place, the Board of Aldermen, the governing board, is saying they're looking to us to advise them. And so I think we should still hold that ability to advise the Board of Aldermen. That's what this board is all about.
And Mr. Ingram, I'm glad that you made a lot of those points because they're relevant for you all to bat around and have this robust discussion. I think it's important, as Mr. Ingram recited, that the purpose of the planning board is to engage the public and make recommendations to the governing board about plans. That includes comprehensive land use plans, the other types of plans that are presented to you all, MPO plans, all of those things that have an impact on the city's growth. So that you don't lose that ability with the proposal that staff is bringing forward to you tonight. The other part about planning boards in the statute is planning boards can have a couple of different flavors. In some jurisdictions, planning boards make quasi-judicial decisions,
Sure.
such that if a plan comes to them, they hear evidence. Evidence is generally proffered by people in the community who have standing, and they have a robust dialogue with the community about what the right outcome should be based on evidentiary findings. You all are not a quasi-judicial body.
Right.
You all are purely legislative. And the subdivision process in the city of New Bern is a technical review process. That's it. I think in the past, there have been members who've come to this body, members of the public, who've been very frustrated because they have an opportunity to come and comment, they feel like they haven't been heard, and then you all have to respond to them and say, if it checks the boxes of the ordinance, we have no choice but to make that approval. So in one way, you could see the invitation of the public to comment on the subdivision process that they cannot influence as a bit of a misnomer. And this is an opportunity proposed by staff to make the process more efficient and do what the ordinance says, which is just the technical review. If there is an issue such that, if staff makes some type of oversight or somebody in the community has information that staff wasn't necessarily provided with, there is a remedy for members of the citizenry to bring that to the attention of a board for some type of review. So I think it's fairly placed to bear in the front of your mind what the planning board's mission is, but I think it's possible to read that mission in conjunction with the proposal that's being proposed.
That's fair. And one of the statements you made was that you didn't see how this eliminated the citizenry's ability to comment on and I didn't understand what you meant by that. Because to me, basically what you're saying is when the application is made, then the administration makes the decision. It doesn't come to us. There's no discussion of it in the open, in the public. You basically are notified that it's done, and then you have to appeal. You have 30 days to appeal. That, yes, citizenry can be heard, but I would imagine there are a lot of people in the citizenry that would think this is a done deal. It's already done. So why am I doing this? And that's the part. And I heard what you said, and you're absolutely right. And we've talked about this as a board, that people come here and they think they have the ability to do something about this, when in fact they really don't, and neither do we. But I still feel like there's value in and that's why you make the statements that you make. I still think there's value in that. That's just my personal opinion. I still think there's value in that.
Point well taken.
I think it's very unfortunate that it's written in the way that it is, that if they want to do a subdivision, basically if it checks the wickets, that's it.
That's it.
And so the citizens can complain, they can shout, they can protest, they can do as they wish, and there is no stopping it. So whether it comes to us or they stand outside of development services and yell at them, and that's the rub. I think the heart of the issue is that, not whether or not it comes to us, is my opinion. Because you're right. If it's a technical review, it's a technical review. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Did they meet the wickets, right? It should be, to this board, it should be X's and O's. Did it meet it technically or not, right? And that's the unfortunate part. And that's the part I don't like. I don't know a way of changing it because I think the citizens aren't heard. I understand listen, if I owned a piece of property and I wanted to do with it as I wanted to, this process works for me. But if I live next to a property and I maybe don't want that to happen, I have no say in it. And you don't have say in it now, and you don't have say in it with this text proposal change. And that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. I totally agree with you.
And I don't know a way of fixing it. I'm sure city staff, talk about it.
One more thing I would say is that it's my personal belief, at least this is the way I would look at it. If I saw that this was happening and I was in the citizenry and I'm like, why do we have a planning and zoning board? If this stuff is supposed to go to them and we have the ability to make public comment and now it's just all going inside the city administration, I'd be a little suspect of that. But that's just me.
Is there a way, not that it matters because it's a technical review, but is there a way to submit for public comment to be included in this process? Whether it's a mailing or a sign, or does the sign say, make comments to the director of development services or their designee? Could there be something on the sign that language says, hey, you don't like this, that's cool, come to the director of development services or their designee and we can talk about it? Is there some,
That is what the sign should say, is anybody who sees this sign that takes exception to it contacts us, essentially. And more to your point.
Real quick,
Sure.
is there something spelled out as to what the sign has to say?
Yes, our
General
ordinance
statute.
does say what the sign has to say on the back end, but I think your question is to the front end.
Okay.
When the application is filed, how does the world know? That's a good question. I think what prudent developers have done in the past, especially with major projects, is they have done, or at least made attempts, to engage the neighboring property owners such that they're knowledgeable about what's happening. Whether they agree or not is an entirely separate issue.
Right.
But having community meetings and those types of things so that it's not a shock to anyone that development is happening. That's on a practical note. That's not necessarily baked into this ordinance. The other thing that you said that I think it's important to bear in mind is the subdivision approval process is only one part of the Planning and Zoning Board's job. Okay? There still would be regular meetings of the Planning and Zoning Board for any text amendments, any zoning map amendments, and to initiate initial zonings. So I don't want you to think if you were to recommend approval of this proposed text that you have just signed the death warrant of the Planning and Zoning Board, because you have not. But I don't know if there's specific authority in 160D to require developers to make that initial publication, but I think that good developers would.
Wasn't there some type of language in the new land use ordinance about having community meetings or something? Didn't we?
Yes.
That would be for conditional zoning.
That's it. It's not for this
Yeah,
part.
so conditional zoning is kind of that hybrid process that everybody really asks about. That's, you want to change the zoning, we want to know exactly what you're doing. So you both know what they're proposing as far as actual development, what they're wanting for the zoning, and they're required to have a community meeting.
Okay. But there's no way to perhaps enforce notice other than on the sign that
The
is being put
sign
up.
giving
That's it.
constructive notice about the decision is that is actually language that we extrapolated from the ordinance.
Okay.
Not ordinance, but the statute in 160D.
Fair enough.
The major crux to how these are evaluated does lie within general statute, because general statute does strictly limit what can be considered for subdivisions.
Right.
And that's actually kind of further complicated with the recent passage of Senate Bill 382. That's moving the goalpost even further as to what we aren't allowed to do.
Roger.
Yeah.
Are you going to elaborate on that later in the meeting, or?
I believe that I haven't had much experience with it. I know the city attorney's office, particularly Scott, has had multiple sessions about how this affects us. And for all intents and purposes, we're kind of in a holding pattern for our development of the land use
Right.
ordinance.
Okay. I'll ask Jamie and staff comments, maybe to brief us a little bit on that. All right. Thanks.
And my apologies for this. This is not responding.
Yeah, technology in City of New Bern sometimes fails us. It's okay.
Was there another flag?
So I want to talk about time frame a little bit. It's been kind of ongoing where a number of developers are having an issue with timing. And I look at this amendment as being able to speed that train up, because I've been on both sides, and so I understand the cost of holding product, and it becomes a stigma against the city where other developers don't want to come into the city limits due to the fact that it is a problem where it's going to get delayed, or it's going to cost more money, or you're going to have more holding time. And so I'm very excited to see how this will move a little quicker. When those general plans are submitted, do they, my understanding is that the staff moves forward having a staff meeting of all the major heads to review that general plan and to deliver those comments back to that developer or engineer.
Correct. Whether it's from the general plan or the final plat, when all things are boiled down, the process is the same, and you're saving approximately 1 month per plan. So the general plan saves a month, and the final plat saves a month. And that's in a perfect world. It all starts with an application. It goes to the DRC, all the major developer organizations and city staff, all of the departments, even the MPO who mostly deals with transportation. They all have either comments or standards that need to be met, and all of those things are compiled and given to the developer. And if there are any issues, they have to come back with a revision that is then kicked out again.
So
But,
my
in a
question-
perfect world.
Right. So my question is how long does each department head have to get their comments back? Because I
30
see the
days.
60-day limit
30
on
days.
the administrator, but I'm just trying to understand as to how long is it really going to take, and what's that check and balance there to ensure that the departmental staff is looking at the plan, they are
Yep.
reacting in a reasonable period of time that gives the head of development services the time to either say yes or no and give those comments back.
Yeah, so whenever an application comes in, they basically have 2 weeks to review those plans, all of the items that go onto DRC, and at DRC is when it's reviewed. We have, as staff, 3 days to compile those comments to get back to the developer, who then has 30 days to provide a revised plan if necessary. And then the process rinses and repeats if there are any issues found with any revision.
So let's say that you get the initial comments back, and it goes back. When they resubmit, does that clock start again another 60 days?
Typically, yes. So when it's resubmitted, it's generally resubmitted in electronic form, and we kick it out immediately after we get it. They technically have 30 days, again, if there are any issues found, to make those revisions, and then the process rinses and repeats.
Okay.
Board have any other questions for staff? No, hearing none. I will open up a public comment period on this. Anybody in the audience have any comments on this item? Hearing none, I'll open it up to, oh, we did, apologize.
Good evening, Chairman.
Snuck up on.
And members of the board. Eric Remington with the law firm of Board and Smith. Again, I was one of the individuals that the development staff asked to look at this and help them put this together. I'm in favor of this amendment because I do think that if you just look at tonight's agenda, it gives you a great example of how this speeds up the process. You know, the first item on your agenda tonight was a subdivision plat approval. And the developer had to wait until they could get on this hearing in order to have that approved. There were no public comments that were made on it. It is a check-the-box kind of system, as Jamie said to you all. And basically, you all voted on it and approved it. That is something that should be done by the staff because the aldermen have said in the ordinance that this is a technical approval process. That's all I would say to you all, is I just think that it's something that should be done, and so I would support it. Thank you.
Fair enough. Anyone else? Mr. Thomas.
John Thomas, Thomas Engineering. Been at this sort of thing since 1978. And currently we're working in about 8 or 10 counties and multiple jurisdictions in those counties, and we see everything across the board that different boards do. We are seeing a trend where we're headed in the direction that staff wants to go in, and we support that for a number of reasons. I know you've heard me object to comments by the public multiple times because I don't think it's appropriate when we come in for a preliminary plat or we come in for a final plat or whatever we're doing. The time for public comment is at the time that that particular piece of property is rezoned. That's when the public comment comes in. Your ordinance is set the framework for what can be done on that piece of property for that particular zone. And in some cases, there is a special use like a conditional use permit, which would be probably a public hearing. My opinion is there's an entitlement to that landowner to stay within that framework. I've often been in meetings where the public is permitted to speak in City of New Bern meetings where they start asking for stuff. Can you do this? Can you do that? that really compromises our ability to get an approval from the board. And so we'll do that, or maybe we'll consider that, or I'll speak with my client about it. So that's kind of where we are. But those things are typically outside of the framework of the ordinance that it requires for me to develop that piece of property. Okay. I think whether you send it back to the drawing board or not, there's just a couple of comments. I'd like to see you approve this to move forward. But in a lot of areas that we work in, we see when the staff or even a planning board is approving preliminary plats, for instance. If you look at the checklist that's on there, it's a lot to do. Basically, if you go right by the letter of the checklist, we're submitting construction drawings and permit documents to you. A lot of the jurisdictions separate that out. We go through the preliminary plat approval process, whether it's with a board or with staff. And that's kind of what we do with y'all. And once that's approved, then we get into what's the construction documents phase, where all the money is spent to produce all those documents and specifications. And that goes back a second time to generally staff for them to distribute the water and sewer, public works and all that to get those approved. That's the way we work here in the city of Denver too, though it's not by the letter of the ordinance, but that's the way we do it. If you've seen, I don't come in with a 50-sheet set of plans to you all for preliminary approval. One reason for that is if there's a hiccup or something needs to be changed, it ripples through that whole set of plans, and it's very expensive to go back and redo all that. But we support the move for staff to do. We feel like the preliminary plat, the final plat, is all an administrative process. All the boxes are checked according to the ordinance and should be approved. I know sometimes it's hard to give up control. I've got some jurisdictions where it still goes to a planning board for a final plat and a preliminary and to a council or commissioners. And believe it or not, I'll show up at a meeting for a final plat to a commissioner meeting, and I'll get a no vote, even though it meets it, I'll get a no vote. That's really uncalled for. But anyway, I'll be glad to answer questions if I can hear those questions, which has been a very difficult thing for me tonight, but I support what they're trying to do.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. I'll open it up to the board for discussion. Any discussion from the board on this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I make the motion that we approve the text amendment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? All those opposed say, or all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Motion carries. New business. Item A, chairman and vice chairman vote. I think in our rules, I'm not allowed to vote on chairman, since I am chairman. But I would, if it's the board's prerogative, would like to continue as chair. But having said that, I'll open it up for discussion.
I make a motion we have Brad Jefferson as our chairman for the next year.
Second.
Well, until January of 26. When is
Yeah.
it?
December.
We had talked about that, Kendra. We had talked about changing that to January. Is that what we said?
I believe it was January.
January.
I think that's
If I'm
what we
not
said.
mistaken.
I wasn't sure because it's March already, so
I do believe it was January.
Yeah, roger that.
so that's my motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, I'll keep doing this gig. As discussed earlier, I do think it's important to have a vice chair for the decision or what I laid out before the meeting. I'll open that part of this open as well to any discussion or however you guys want to handle it. Is there anyone who would like to be vice chair? We can leave it open, we can table it, we can not have a vice chair, whatever you guys want to do.
And just to be clear, the role of the vice chair is merely to run the meeting in the absence of the chairman. So,
So I would like to make a motion, if he's willing to do it, Rusty Ingram to be vice chair.
I have a motion?
He has to, if he wants to.
I would take on the responsibility.
Okay, all right. I have a motion, I have a second. And I can vote on this item or not? Okay. All those in favor, or any discussion on this item?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Rusty. Vice Chair.
Mr. Ingram's term will run concurrent with the chair.
Correct. Apologies. Yes, absolutely. Is that, so your motion there, Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
That works for you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll move on to item B, land use ordinance update discussion.
Sure. So as I had mentioned earlier, we're kind of in a holding pattern. We have started drafting, or our consultant rather, has started drafting the items that aren't affected by Senate Bill 382's approval. And as I kind of alluded to, it does move the goalpost as to what we can and cannot regulate. One of those things is in relation to downzoning and the definition of downzoning. And something as simple as imposing an additional restriction or not allowing a particular use, anything that could hinder that particular development as opposed to what is currently written in the text could be seen as a downzoning and therefore would not be legal. So an example of that would be our creation of the new consolidated zoning districts with uses that are or are not or are permitted by special use or conditional. That has kind of stopped our progress on. So it's in a bit of a weird state. There's been a lot of outreach from municipalities, such as counties and cities, to their local representatives. There are several pieces of legislation that are at the state level right now waiting to be heard. Jamie, do you recall exactly how many? It might even be easier to recall who hasn't submitted something that's offended by this.
Yeah, that probably would be a better metric. I can say that the Newbern Board of Aldermen adopted a resolution in January of this year expressing to our local delegation a desire to be exempted from the now legislation that was SB 382. It is my understanding that every jurisdiction in Craven County, Pamlico County, perhaps Carteret, and maybe Beaufort have taken similar actions, and that all of that information has been forwarded to our local delegation. I have not checked the pending bills this week. The last time I checked, it is a large outcry across the state of municipalities that are asking to either be exempted or for SB 382 to be repealed. So we're confident that our local delegation is going to be responsive and working with our legislators in the General Assembly in Raleigh to remedy this issue. But until that time, Mr. Goff is right that there is a significant impact in our ability to move forward with our land use ordinance. And our office has been in communication with the consultants that are working on the update and actually sharing those resolutions so that his counterparts across the state have the benefit of our best thinking as well.
So how would this work? I mean, you guys are still developing portions of the land use ordinance that are not restricted by Senate Bill 382. So you basically would replace those sections and not replace other sections? Is that?
We are hopeful that we're going to have a resolution to Senate Bill 382 before we get too much further down the football field in that project.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
As of March 7th, there appears to be 23 different pieces of legislation involving several counties and all of the cities that are within those counties. One of which also includes everybody. That was kind of a blanket piece of legislation, I believe.
So will this, and this is just an opinion, I'm not asking for definite, so this is going to extend the land use ordinance, or do we think we'll be right around the same time frame as we had thought before?
Too early to know.
Too early to know? Okay.
Hopeful that we can get an exemption, and we're slowly proceeding. there is a chance that this could extend the timeline and cost.
Okay. Having said that, selfish question, is there another steering committee meeting on the horizon, or are we now just kind of sitting and waiting and hoping?
We are waiting and hoping.
Roger. Okay.
I know that there was a calendar that had a plan for their next visit, which included work sessions with the steering committee and public engagement, but there's not really anything new to discuss at that point because of 382.
Okay.
It did go all the way back to January, so.
Roger. Okay. All right, how about item C, final plat timeline discussion?
Yeah, I was going to make the comment, Mr. Chairman. Our board member Kip, he was the one that essentially was trying to initiate that conversation previously. I don't know how the board may feel about either carrying that to the next meeting, or if in fact, we could possibly dismiss it just based on what we put forth tonight. That would be up to you all, but I can work it either which way if you would like for it to go to the next agenda.
Okay.
I think if Kip proposed this as new business discussion, that since he's not present, it would probably be appropriate to push it to the next meeting, just to offer to him in lieu of what happened tonight.
Yeah, and I think the text amendment tonight is going to help the situation considerably. And
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I can put it on for the next meeting as well to give him an opportunity. That's kind of what my thought was.
Do we need a motion to table, or is that staff direction good enough, Mrs. City Attorney?
Let's entertain a motion to table that.
Okay.
I move we move new business item C to our next meeting, to the agenda of our next meeting.
I have
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Any staff comments tonight?
The only comment I would, I guess, have to say is that we do have one rezoning that's coming up for the next meeting. I believe that is April 17th, if I'm not mistaken. So there'll be essentially, thus far, as it sits, it's one rezoning on that agenda. That's the expectation. I just wanted to really update the board. But that's it. That is the only staff comment.
If that text amendment passes, that will be more than normal.
Yes, you're actually correct. Yes, that
Yes.
will be on there as well. I apologize.
We'll be back to meetings of 11 minutes.
Yes. That's right. Roger. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.